and to say welcome. Thank you for joining us once again. We're into a whole different Torah portion. And this Torah portion is the beginning of the last 5 Torah portions of Exodus, and all basically deal with one subject, and that is the construction of the tabernacle. And it is so important that we deal in various kinds of ways about the construction of the tabernacle. So let me go to the screen share. And here we are. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. This is the very beginnings of it. Let's see what there was before. Where do we end with? Okay, it just simply says up here, Vayavo Moshe b'toch ha'anan. Moses came into the cloud. Vaya'al el hahar. He went up to the mountain. Vahi Moshe bahar arba'im yom v'arba'im laila. And Moses was in the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So the first day when he went up wouldn't have counted towards the 40 days and 40 nights. And we'll have to come to that later. Because in the middle of all this construction of the tabernacle, we read about the rebellion of the Israelites and the awful, awful moment of worshiping the golden calf. But we aren't going to come to that until another 2 weeks. So we have Truma, and then we'll have Tetzaveh, and then we'll have Ki Tisa. And it's in Ki Tisa that we read about the sin of the golden calf. So, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. So Hashem spoke to Moses to saying, Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel. Vayikhu li truma, let them take for me a gift. And you understand a gift. We'll clarify the gift. Me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo, from any man, from every man whose heart moves him. Tikhu et trumati, you shall take my gift. So in other words, this wasn't a commandment, this was a free will offering. And the reason I've got those Roman numerals is because of one of Rashi's comments. So here's the word truma here, number 1. Here is truma, trumati, second time, and the third time, truma, 3 times. Okay. And I'll do the verse since we're including it. Vezot ha-truma, this shall be this free will offering. Asher tikhu me'itam, and we can translate truma simply as a gift. And in fact, I believe it's sometimes in even modern Hebrew, it's understood that way. Asher tikhu me'itam, the gift that you shall take from them, zahav, gold, v'chesef, and silver, unachoshet, and brass or copper, however you want to translate nechoshet. And it keeps going on. You notice that I've numbered these words as well, because they include all the various things that you'll see. Goes on. Here we go. Right? All these different things. Up until here. Up until here.
In modern Hebrew, truma would most commonly be used to mean donation.
Right. And that's what it means. In other words, donation means it's something they want to do. And of course, donner in French means to give. Okay. Vayikhu li truma. They should take for me a truma, a donation, and I'll translate it that way. Li lishmi, meaning it should be brought for my sake. When they give this gift, they should be giving it with the intention of giving it to me. Truma, this word. Parsha, the Parsha, Hafrasha, Yafrishuli. It's not Parsha, it's Hafrasha, the separating off, the giving. Yafrishuli, they should separate off from me, mi mamonam nedava, from their substance a gift, a nedava, a gift. Yidvenu libo, whose heart moves him, lashon nedava, v'hu lashon ratzon tov. The connotation of the word nedava is that it means goodwill. It is a connotation of goodwill. And again, it's hard to say what the Rashi is here, right? And I think in Sfaria they have a different word that looks completely different from this word, because this looks like faisant or something like that, belashon, belaz in French, Old French. And the Yiddish is geschenk, and geschenk means a gift, a gift. And it could be, I have to do it from memory, but I think Safaria says something like apaisement or something like that. I'm not certain. The point is that it's a gift. And we can talk about that just a little bit more. At any rate, in a sec, let's get through the Rashi. Tikhu et trumati, you shall take my gift, the gift that you give to me. Amru Rabotenu. So our sages, our rabbis said, Shlosha Trumot Amurot Kan. There are actually three different gifts, three different donations that are mentioned here. Aleph, the first, Truma Beka Lagulgolet. There is the Truma of the half shekel to a person. Okay, that isn't mentioned here. That's mentioned in Kitisa, when they take the census, right? And that is a mitzvah. That is not a truma in the way that they're talking about here. It's not a free will offering, but it is a truma. Shene'esu mehem ha'adanim. The silver, this half shekel silver piece, they were collected, and from them were made the adanim, the sockets for the tabernacle. And I will try and find a picture later on, later this week, to show you what we're talking about. But the boards, if this is making any sense, speaking of it, since it's a very graphic kind of thing, the boards had tenons on the bottom. They had these sort of two tenons, and they fit into sockets. And those sockets that slid up and down these tenons, or that accommodated the tenons, were the adanim, and they were made out of silver. Kamo shemafurash be'ele pekudei, as is explained in Ele Pekudei. It talks in that parsha. It's the parsha that follows Kitisa, and they describe the silver that went into the sockets and how that silver came from the half shekel donation. So that's one truma. Va'achat, another one is trumat hamizbeach. This is the money that was collected for the altar. Another beka la gulgolet. Again, it happened also a half shekel per person. This actually happened in subsequent years after the initial half shekel that was mentioned in Kitisa. Le kupot, it went towards a communal fund, liknot mehen korbanot tzibur, so that they could purchase the communal sacrifices that were brought on the altar. So you know that a lamb was brought in the morning every single day, a lamb in the morning, a lamb in the afternoon. And then there were these public offerings. There were the two lambs that were brought on Shabbat. There were the offerings that brought on Rosh Chodesh, and there were additional offerings that were brought on the festivals. All those were public offerings, and of course there were a huge number brought during during Sukkot. And I can also tell you that they had additional offerings that were brought during, it was called Kayetz HaMizbeach, the summertime of the altar, because only they felt that it was necessary to show that there was generosity, and because during the summer between Shavuot and Rosh Hashanah, there's really nothing going on in terms of special holidays. They brought additional offerings to offer up on the altar. So that's number two. This is these trumot. Va'achat hatrumat va'achat trumat hamishkan, and the one of them is the truma that was brought for the construction of the tabernacle. Nedava, this indeed was free will. This offering, this truma, was a nedava, kol echad ve'echad, each and nidvat kol echad ve'echad, excuse me, the gift of each and every individual. So these are the three different trumot, and this, what we're talking about here in this particular section, is the trumat hamishkan. So he says, now he goes on to Yud Gimel Dvarim Ha'amurim Be'inyan, the 13 different items mentioned here. Kulam Hutzrachu Lamelechet HaMishkan. Every single one of them were required for the construction of the tabernacle, or Livigdei Kuhuna, or for the attire of the priests, the priestly garments. When we go through carefully them. Okay. I'm going to do the Torah Tamima here because he expands on what Rashi has just told us. Vayikuli truma. They should bring me a gift, or donations. Tana Rabbi Chia b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So Rabbi Chia said, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, here we go, Shalosh Trumot, Gimel, Aleph Bet Gimel, three gifts, Ne'emru beParsha zo. They are stated in this section. Trumat Adanim, just as Rashi was saying, right? The Truma, the gift that was given for the sockets, Trumat Shkalim, so he doesn't call it the Truma of the Mizbeach. And the Torah Tamima will discuss that a little bit, okay? And that is because when we talk about the Machatzit HaShekel, as in all subsequent years, we're talking about the fund that went to fund the communal sacrifices, the public offerings, Utrumat HaMishkan, and the gifts that were brought to construct the tabernacle. So just going back for 1 second, is that one of the ways you can subdivide the sacrifices is that there was a category of public offerings, and then there were also personal offerings. There was also that option as well for individuals to bring an offering depending on the personal circumstances, which would move them to bring an offering. Daber el bnei Israel vayakuli truma. So he actually outlines the verses involved, right? Speak to the children of Israel, and they should take from me a truma. Ze zo trumat adanim. This is a reference to the sockets. Tikhu et trumati, you shall bring my truma. Zo trumat shkalim. This is a reference to the shkalim, the money that went for the offerings. V'zot ha-truma asher tikhu me'itam. That's the next verse that says, and this is the truma you shall take from them. Zo trumat hamishkan. That is, in fact, then the truma that went to construct the tabernacle. And he is taking this from the Talmud Yerushalmi, and the tractate is Shkalim, because it's talking about the annual collection of the Shkalim. And of course, yesterday was Shabbat Shkalim, and we in fact made a reference to one of the categories of Shkalim, or two of them, as a matter of fact, if you think about it. So let's take a look at Bet here in the Torah Tamima. Here it is. I'm going to make the text just a teeny bit bigger. I hope I can. All right. There we go.
Oh, that's good.
I,
I like that. I keep
aim,
trying to do that on my own screen, and I have no control. But you're
actually,
doing.
you should, because it should say something about how large the screen share would be. But sometimes it's problematic because you would not be able to see. Okay, it looks like I got some stuff in here that I need to get rid of.
It shows at the top there's view options.
That's right.
And I usually make it 150%, but you can't see the whole text. You only can see if it's off the page, because it's 150%. You can only see where the cursor is moving.
All right, I'll try to learn that stuff.
And as you can see, Shira Beth, it is sometimes recalcitrant as it just went up in, it just went down to the
Yeah, it
original
has a mind of its own. Okay.
through no fault of my own. At any rate, here goes. But I must have done something. Who knows? So regardless, Ritzono Lomar. What's the point of this quotation he's just given us? Shalosh pa'amim ne'mara milat truma. The point is that the word truma is mentioned 3 times. By kuli truma, they should bring from me a gift. Tikhu trumati, you should bring or take my truma. Vezot truma, and this is the truma. Ulefi pshuto, and according to the if you just take this on its simple basis, meaning that God is instructing Moses to tell the Israelites to bring a gift, right? If that's all it means, hava le mar. It could have just said, in fact, it should have just said, if all it meant to say was what I just said, it should have said, vayichuli truma ma'et kol ish asher yidvanu libo. It should have just said, and they should bring me a gift from every man whose heart moves him, and then go on with the list. It didn't need to mention truma 3 times, that actual word 3 times. So the argument then is that the reason why the Torah mentions 3 times the actual word truma is to tell us this, to allude to the 3 different trumot. And now we go, right? Gold and silver, etc. V'lachen darish sheba l'ramez al shlosha trumot ele. And this is the reason that it is interpreted that these 3 words, 3 times of the truma, come to allude, remez, to hint regarding these 3 trumot. Uma shelo piresh kan rak trudmat hamishkan, and the reason why he only goes into specifics regarding the trumat hamishkan, the gifts that were brought to construct the tabernacle, hu mishum deki kevan deki. I'm going to think it's going to be kivan hatzivui bekan. That is the direction in which the commandment goes here. Lakachat mikol ish, to take from every man, utruma kazo, right? And this specific truma of these particular items, halcha letrumat hamishkan. That those specific gifts that are then explained following go to the truma to construct the tabernacle. In other words, the question he's asking is, why dafka do we explain truma here to refer truma hamishkan? Well, that's because what follows right afterwards. Ma she'eno kentiv trumat adanim. Doesn't say regarding the trumat adanim. So again, here it says, according to everyone, according to their will. It's a free will offering. But the trumat adanim, utrumat kalim, okay, however, when it came to the truma of the sockets, or the truma for the shkalim, for the money for the offerings, nigbu rak mimi she nimnu legulgolet, I think is what it's supposed to say. Right, was only appropriated, nigbu. Those shkalim were only appropriated from those who were counted in the census, right? In other words, the poll, it would be the head tax, right? And they were miben esrim shana, from 20 years old and up, umizcharim, and they were only males. So those 2 other trumot were only taken from them. Kamavuar Barush Parshat Tisa, as it's explained in the beginning of the Parsha of Ki Tisa, Uverush Parshat Pekudei, and also it's explained in the Parsha of Pekudei, Ele Pekudei. V'Iyen B'Bavli. So here we go. He says, look out, Vide, right? Look in the Bavli, because remember what he quoted was from the Yerushalmi. Megillah, the tractate Megillah, Kaf Tet, page 29, B, Tana Rav Yosef. There it says Tana Rav Yosef, not Rabbi Chia. Shalosh Trumothem, it says there were 3 Trumas, Shal Mizbeach, La Mizbeach, of the, in other words, the Truma for the Mizbeach, for the altar, went to the altar, the money went to the altar, Veshel Adanim La Adanim, and the one that went for the Adanim went to the Adanim, Veshel Bedek Habayit, and for the Bedek Habayit would mean the building fund, right? A Bedek Habayit would mean for the maintenance of the temple, the Bedek Habayit, and it went to the maintenance of the house. Upiresh Rashi, and there, so this is so interesting, right? It's not saying what we appear to be saying. Upiresh Rashi, and Rashi explains there, Trumat Adanim Haitala Adanim, that the Adanim certainly went for the sockets at the time, Utrumat Mizbeach La Mizbeach, and the money that was collected for the altar, for the public offerings went for the altar, Liknot Bahen Korbanot Tzibur. And there he explains that the altar means to purchase from those shkalim the sacrifice, the public sacrifices, L'chol Hashana, for the entire year, Tichtiv Bazeh, because regarding that it says Lechaper al nafshotechem, to grant atonement for your souls, which of course tells us, right, the nature of the sacrifices. They were to atone for our souls. Let me explain that a little bit further. Here is the dynamic that we're looking at. Who is the author of our lives? Who is the author of our very existence? And that, of course, is the ultimate one, the ultimate one. And when we choose not to do the divine will, this ultimate existent one has a will. And in a sense, if you look at everything other than human beings, they're all programmed, in a sense, you could say, that as we understand the nature of animals and how they behave, it is all can be understood as being an extension of divine will and creation, with one exception, human beings. And when human beings choose to go against divine will, their lives then become forfeit, because they are not fulfilling the purpose for which they were created. So that in a sense, the lives could be every individual life. Every time a person contravenes divine will, their life could be snuffed out. But it doesn't happen that way. God provides a means by which human beings can substitute something else, but for them to become, but at the same time, to become aware of what is wrong with what they did. Because part of the problem is that we don't think it's wrong. We justify it. And were we to recognize how obnoxious it was, it might motivate us to stop doing it. And we wouldn't do it. And we'd think about it. And so think about this. Think about how this happened. If a person brought a sin offering, an animal as a sin offering, they had to lay their hands on the horns of the animal. And they had to press down hard on that. And then the animal was slaughtered. And when they were holding the horns of the animal, in a sense, was an extension of themselves. And in that true sense, that animal was a kapara. It became a substitute for their own lives. Now, I'm talking now theory. Of course, in actual practice, it was subject to all kinds of abuses. We know that one can get inured to anything that requires sensitivity. It can become mechanical. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the principle right now. And so, l'chaper al nafshotechem, that's the implication of these 3 words here. And the public offerings came to atone for the group and even though it might not have atoned for individual situations, but as a group, in terms of how the group of individuals were acting together as a group, it came to atone for that. So, v'nir'eh, and it appears, de makor echad lishtei hadrashot. Okay, it appears that one source of two of these drashas, rak sheba'u beshinui lashon. It's only that they came, okay, with a certain change of language. Rakma, and here's the point, Rakma shekore b'Yerushalmi trumat shkalim, whereas in the Yerushalmi it refers to the truma of shkalim, kore bebavli trumat mizbeach. He refers to it as the truma of the mizbeach, of the altar. Utrumat hamishkan, and the truma of the mishkan, hainu trumat bedek habayit. So in the one source where it talks about the Trumat HaMishkan, which in the one case would have only gone for the construction of the tabernacle, in subsequent years, that would have referred then to the Bedek Habayit, to the maintenance of the temple, because that money would have gone to make sure that the construction was sound. Umashikatav kan Rashi, and referring to what Rashi writes here, Vaikuli Truma, Li Lishmi, where he says, Me, Li Lishmi, to my name, he says, Ien Mashikatuv Besamuch, he's not going to actually talk about it here. He makes a reference to it later on, but Pasuk Chet in verse 8. Ot Chet in, it looks like, I assume that's a Chet. It could be a taf, who knows? V'tzaref lakan, and you can add it to what we wrote here. So we're not going to get an answer. It's going to be a cliffhanger for that. And that is where I'm going to stop today. I'm going to stop the share, and we just have a couple of minutes. All right. So any reactions? If you, yes?
Well, I'm thinking that I'm not sure if I'm really following the gist of this. They're trumot which have to be given, because if you don't get enough of what's needed for you, for example, you won't be able to make enough adanim.
Yes.
And then and the daily sacrifice has to happen every day, so you have to have enough of that. So where does the Yadavenu Libo part come in?
That comes for the Trumat HaMishkan. That's what
That
we're
apart
talking about.
from Trumat Mishkan, and the
Right.
other
And the
are-
Bedek Habayit as well. And that would also count for the Bedek Habayit, for the maintenance, the building fund.
and so the maintenance and the building of the Mishkan will be as grand and rich and beautiful as it turns out to be, depending on how generous the people turn
Yeah.
out to be.
In fact, it does. And
And
in fact,
go ahead.
we read later on that Moses has to tell them to stop bringing stuff.
Right, they are generous, it turns out. But
Yeah,
I guess it's like two of the trumot you could really more describe as taxes, because you have to have that minimum amount to keep things going.
well, some donations are a tax. They're nevertheless a donation. It's something that it's property, or in this case, money that's coming from you to support something else.
And I also just want to point out that commandment and free will are not mutually exclusive or opposites. So, even though he's telling us to do it, whether we do it or not, is still, I'm not saying that this makes perfect sense, but I think it's in there somewhere that it's, you can still look at it as free will.
So understand that there are three types of communication. One is a
Right.
commandment, meaning you must do this, you cannot do this, right? Positive or negative, command. Then there's one that says you may do this if you want, right? that's and one may be a suggestion, and then there's another kind that's circumstantial that says,
Okay, but
well,
my
if this,
point was,
then
but
that.
this skirting my point though. My point was that even the you must do this, the harshest commandment, nonetheless does not absolve the free will agreeing to do the commandment.
I think if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that you still have the free will to observe the commandment. Just because God
Right.
has told you to do it doesn't necessarily mean you're automatically going to do it.
That's right.
That's the point you're making. Yes,
Yes.
of course, of course. But in this case, we're talking about if you like, do it, and if you don't want to do it, no penalty, right? Which of course is the way we treat most commandments.
Well, with the atonement one, maybe there's a penalty, but it's not directly, well, you didn't, do this, but if you haven't atoned properly, there may be a penalty for that. And one thing that we talked about in Torah study yesterday in another class was about, or Friday, was that some of this was to atone for the golden calf,
Indeed.
and
Absolutely.
that even the people who didn't participate in it did not participate in stopping it, and so it was for everybody to need to atone at that time, everybody in that place at that time.
Okay, but in case you missed this, the point about the atonement part is that was a tax. That was not an
Right.
optional gift. This here we're talking about totally optional. But in the case of the atonement one, every single person, every single male
Right.
who was old enough had to bring it.
Right. No, I didn't miss that. But yeah, what I'm saying is everybody had to atone, and part of that was because everybody had participated in some way or the other in the golden calf.
Mhm.
Those people at that time I'm talking about.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we're going to stop right there, and I'm going to stop the recording and thank everyone who's participated.